Hello, this is South Africa at 30, a podcast brought to you by Brand South Africa, where we look at the country through a lens of growth potential and opportunity. I'm Jeremy Maggs, and it's my job to showcase and engage stakeholders, decision makers, and general movers and shakers as we retrace where we came from. We take a view on where we're going and how we're getting there. Now, South Africa has a checkered past when it comes to human rights. Many people have experienced pain, violence, and discrimination. But at the advent of democracy, this was taken into account with the formation of the Human Rights Commission. This organization does sterling work in promoting a culture of tolerance, empathy, and understanding. Professor Madlingozi is a full-time commissioner at the organization and joins me now. Professor, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us. What do we mean by a human rights culture?
What we mean by human rights culture, let's first define human rights. So human rights differ from other rights that we get because of a legal commercial contract. Those rights comes through because we've concluded a contract, or rights that come about because of a delict. If you do something unlawful against me, you owe me something, that's right. Human rights are rights that we have just because we are human beings and just because we've got inherent dignity. They can't be taken away, they cannot be given. The state simply guarantees them. So when we talk about a human rights culture, we talk about a culture in society where human rights are proactively respected and implemented, where politics is on the basis of human rights, and where business, corporate, the way they do business is also the basis of human rights. So when we talk about a human rights culture, we're talking about a culture that suffuses all sectors of society with respect for people's dignity, people's rights to expression, and people's rights to dignity.
Obviously, you can't put a value to the importance of human rights, but I would suggest to you, given our tortured past in this country, and we are recording this interview only 30 years into democracy, that it has more of a poignant meaning for us in this country. It's almost the value is intrinsically greater. Would you accept that argument?
No, absolutely, absolutely. You are quite right. 30 years is a very, very short time to entrench a culture, to change mindset, and to shift attitudes. We are talking about a country with a history of more than 300 years of colonialism, of slavery, of genocide, of dispossession, of hatred between groups. So it's going to take a long time to come up with a culture of human rights. Compared to other countries, we have a bigger, claim and a bigger calling for all of us in business, in education, in government, to respect human rights. So for us, we, because of our history, there's a bigger, more at stake to forge a culture of human rights.
Do you think we might have lost sight of that?
Yeah, no, obviously, there was a lot of euphoria in 1994, rightly so, of course, coming out of, if you remember back from 1986 to 1996, more people were killed in the history of South Africa than at any point of South Africa. A lot of people killed in the so-called ANC versus IFP violence in KwaZulu-Natal.
I was on the front line of reporting that story. It was every single day was atrocious. Yes.
Massacres, not two people, but massacres
Yes.
every day. So 1994, that transition, was a big moment for us. And it was very, very important to have that peaceful transition. So we can talk about three eras. You talk about the era of Mr. Mandela, where reconciliation was at the forefront. Let's reconcile and build a united South Africa. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission as part of that. Then with the era of Mr. Mbeki, emphasizing the idea of economic, emancipation, African renaissance, and the need for South Africa to play a meaningful role internationally. After that, we seem to, up to now, the third era, we seem to have forgotten that. We seem to be intolerant with each other. I always say that the voting that happened in May this year was a referendum about nation building and cohesion. And the referendum came out to say we reject cohesion, we reject unity. That is very scary, that people still vote along racial lines, along ethnic lines. We should be very concerned about that. So I think there was lot of missed opportunities, a lot of regression in terms of positive policies that we had at the beginning, and an attitude of impatient from all of us, not understanding that 30 years is very, very short. So I will agree that we have lost sight of that, and perhaps this milestone of 30 years behoves on all of us to pause. Some people are talking about a national dialogue, to pause and say, where are we? What is a national question today? Because when we talk about human rights culture, human rights violation, it takes place in the broader framework of whether there is a country or not, there's a nation or not. So I think the call for a national dialogue, a second CODESA, a second TRC, those calls are well made.
Let's get back to the national dialogue in just a moment, because it is a current buzzword in societal discourse right now. I also want to ask you in just a moment about what progress we've made in terms of human rights, because despite the picture of deficiency in certain areas that you articulate, progress has been made. We can talk about that in just a moment, but I want to talk about you for a moment. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and where were you in '94?
My goodness. So in 1994, I was in a very small mining African community called Velcom in the Free State. So I was born in Bloemfontein, but then we moved to Velcom, where my father was a mine worker,
Underground.
Underground, and I died while working in the mine and so forth, which is why I'm here in terms of the work that I do. But also growing up in a mining affiliated community, those communities, when a mine collapses, which is the only sector that keeps the community together, a lot of social ills come up, gender-based violence, drug abuse, and so forth. So that's where I was, and there was a lot of hope, in 1994. I remember, us not going to school, celebrating the return of the Messiah, this man who we've not even seen pictures of, since, from 1990, we saw his pictures, but seeing him, taking the podium, being inaugurated as the first black president, a lot of hope. So that's why I was, a mixture of hope, like my name, Tsepo means hope for what is to come, but also looking around, the poverty, the disregard for human life of miners. If you're a mine worker, you work in the mine, you get sick, you get lung disease, you get discarded, to come back to your community. So that's where I was, in this mixed emotion of, is it possible for this new dispensation to free these people, so that they can be proper human beings? Because where we were born, I can tell you an example of environmental injustice, where we were born, where we were living, across the road was a shit dump, coming from the suburbs, but we were living next to it. So every day breathing this, this sewage, from the suburbs. So this anger that these people, their ways come to us, and we've got to breathe this, people get to, to die from this thing, So that's why I studied law, to say this new constitution, can we use this constitution to better the lives of people, So that's where I was in 1994. Maybe I was, 16 years old, 17 years old.
What led you to the path of human rights and to the Human Rights Commission?
So when we were living in Bloemfontein, where I was born, my father will come home only 3 months, every 4 months, come for 3 days, 4 days, and then go back to the mine, So, and also, when we moved to Velcom, him dying, still working in the mine. So that sense of injustice, I used to say this white
You
people.
were angry?
I was angry. These white people killed my father. That's how I used to say it, even though the cause of death was a heart attack, when I was 13 years old. But that was my language. These white people killed my father, took away my childhood because I didn't grow up with a father. Then the second big memory was my grandfather, who worked as a night watchman, a so-called security guard. And he worked for this company, and that time I was living with my grandmother, and he used to wake up at 4 in the morning to go, guard this warehouse. And they made him sign, something. He couldn't read. And they said, oh, no, we'll pay you after a year. After the year, they said, no, what you're signing that you received payment. So what are you talking about? You know? And after that, my mother was trying to do something and lawyers and nothing happened, and he lost his mind. He died of dementia, but I say he died because of this injustice, But in the broader society, seeing gender-based violence so normalized. We lived in the street next to a tavern, people being killed every day on the streets, So the idea that there is something called the new constitution that guarantees human rights. It's a new constitutional code, a human rights commission. That's what, made me very enthusiastic to go on this path.
So it's a fascinating story. It's not a pleasant story, but you could have gone in two directions. One is you could have channeled that anger into something completely different, yet you chose the high road. You chose to pursue a career in law where you could make a difference, and you've ended up in an organization like the Commission, which is so critical to the future growth and success of this country. So you must have some hope going forward now. So we have, in spite of the difficulties and the problems that we still encounter, we have made certain steps in progress in our human rights culture. What are they?
We can talk about many. Compared to most countries, we have a liberal constitution that guarantees so many rights. One of 12, constitutions that explicitly guarantees the right, not to discriminate against LGBTQI communities. The only one in Africa. We've got a Human Rights Commission, I should talk about my organization, that every year receives an A status from the United Nations because of our independence, because of our rigorous methodology, but because of our impact. This Human Rights Commission. We've got equality courts, which are a vehicle for quick justice on issues of, equality. We've got a very solid legislative framework that is based on human rights. We've got, people protest every day in South Africa. But if you listen to their language when they protest, they talk about human rights. These people are denying me my right to water, my right to electricity. So that shows you how human rights has suffused the language of politics, because human rights is so intrinsic in our society. We can talk about implementation, that's a different conversation. But in terms of the culture, even in politics, with our very, shall we say, vibrant political culture, people still invoke human rights, in their language, even in parliament. We can talk about, policies that we have changed, as a country. We don't have Group Barriers Act anymore. We don't have Immorality Act anymore. So we've made a lot of strides in our country. Implementations continue to be a problem. The deep-seated poverty, is a violation of human rights. Youth and unemployment sitting at 67-70%. That's violence. That's a human rights violation. So 30 years is not enough, but we have made some strides.
What I find fascinating is that you're suggesting that the human rights culture and the Commission are also seen as an example, as a beacon for other countries, given the kudos that the United Nations gives us.
That's right.
And that's a good thing.
No, absolutely. I was just in Mozambique 2 weeks ago, meeting with the Human Rights Commission. And they were like, please come back and come with your commission so that we can exchange lessons. How do you do this? How do you fight for your independence from the treasury, for your budget? How do you fight for your independence from the executive and so forth, And of course, one says, no, South Africa is not a big brother. We're not coming for lessons. We should exchange lessons. But we are seen as an example out there of a very solid human rights based constitution, a very solid legislative framework. A lot of our legislation is exported to other countries. It shouldn't be like that, but people copy and paste a lot of our legislation, So, compared to other countries, we've made strides, and not only compared to, developing countries, even compared to developed countries. a country like the United States of America, they don't have a human rights constitution. They don't have equality courts. They struggle with police brutality. They struggle with environmental racism and so forth. So really, it's difficult to compare countries, and one shouldn't compare countries. But sometimes we beat ourselves too much in South Africa. Out there, the constitutional courts of Germany, of Canada, of Uganda, they use our jurisprudence a lot in their decisions. So, out there we are a beacon, but that must translate into meaningful change in South Africa.
Explain to me how the average South African can use the commission. And once you have examined, investigated, and adjudicated, is enforcement a problem?
Yeah. No. So we do a lot of promotional work because, of course, if people don't know about the human rights, they're not able to claim those human rights. So part of our work is a lot of awareness raising, a lot of conscientizing people about their human rights.
How do you do that?
We do that. Number one, we publish a lot of pamphlets. My office just published a pamphlet on intersex children, for example, working with the Department of Health, where we say, stop mutilating your children just because, they are born with intersex, organs and so forth. So a lot of educational material. We've got a mood court competition for high school learners, which I'm very, very proud of, which, guarantees a lot of human rights advocates for the future because they participate in this human rights, mood court, up to the constitutional court where they argue this case. So we have a lot of human rights champions from this thing. We do a lot of work on, seminars, workshops, and so forth. But also the investigations that we do for an individual. So you ask how people can reach the commission. On our website, people are able to use an online form to submit their complaints. People are able to walk to any of our provincial offices because it's important for people to come here to Johannesburg, to go to our provincial offices and hand their complaints. But also people are able to send, by letters, via the post office and so forth. We are now working on a digital, app where people can, because a lot of people are using phones these days, so be able to submit complaints. So that's how people reach us in terms of the Human Rights Commission. What we've also seen is that, apart from investigations, we also conduct hearings and inquiries. We do that when we want to get to the root cause of the problem. What are the systemic issues, with this violation?
And this could be an issue that you simply, as an organization, have identified and are concerned about. So you don't have to act on a complaint.
No.
You can extemporaneously do it yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. We just did that last week with, a member of parliament where we saw something on the media and we acted proactively ourselves. So our powers, our act, give us the power on our own accord to investigate. But the hearings also work as, they're also pedagogical, because they're on TV, they are live, they're in the radio. People are able to hear that if you do this, this is wrong. And if you do that, this is okay. We've got a social media channel that is also wonderful, especially for young people, the do's and don'ts of media, social media. Lastly, we go to parliament to educate parliamentarians, to say, this a policy or legislation that we think you should pass, this legislation that you should amend or repeal. Or we go to parliament to say, we have had a report, you ask me about implementation. That continues to be a challenge for us in South Africa. After 300 years of colonialism, apartheid, and, intolerance, there's a culture of impunity. We should say that in South Africa.
So how do you overcome that? How do you make sure that the excellent work that you are doing actually resonates, that it finds bounce?
Yeah, so that's a very tricky one, because one would say, let's go after high-profile individuals so that we can set an example. So we also do that because high-profile individuals
you'll get the coverage.
Will get the coverage, and therefore, becomes awareness raising. But also, we shouldn't forget about, things that happen in smaller communities. So we have found that when we, go after high-profile individuals and high-profile cases, that shifts the needle a little bit. We have also many times gone back to court and said, court, We came to you on an equality court matter. You ruled in favor of us, but there's not been implementation, contempt of court decision, And that's a very serious, judgment because, we are at the point where we say, please hit that minister in their own pocket, financial cost against this minister or jail this official for not respecting court decisions. So that's what we can do. We go back to court, we do awareness raising, we go to parliament where we name and shame and say, this past financial year, these ministers have not respected our decisions as a constitutionally created body. Parliament help us with oversight, So those are some of the things that we do.
If you were to look at the single greatest achievement in 30 years in terms of human rights in South Africa, is it possible for you to identify one thing?
No, it's not impossible.
I mean, you listed
That's right.
You listed the accomplishments, but is there any one thing that stands out that says, as a result of the work that you've done in this space, it's been pivotal as far as the trajectory of South Africa is concerned?
I can give you two examples. One example is on the sales in execution of houses. When people default on their houses, we're able to intervene to change the uniform rules of court so that, before a bank sells someone's house, there must be judicial oversight. That has led to a lot of people's houses not being sold, without their knowledge or without a court intervention. It's not publicized because we don't see people being evicted, but it has really changed a lot of people's lives to say, you can't, say this person is defaulted, you're going to sell the house, in auction for R1.
That's a huge accomplishment.
It's a huge accomplishment, but it doesn't get coverage because it's, those smaller things. Yeah. At a bigger level, all politicians know that they cannot commit hate speech. They cannot call their fellow politicians cockroaches, snakes, and things like that. That was big in the 1990s, if you remember. It's not there anymore. Of course, there's some, one or two.
Which means you're making a big difference.
We are making that difference. And of course, hate speech can lead to a lot of consequences. Can lead to massacres, can lead to people being killed, can lead to people not being able to campaign. So it's got multiplier effect, So those are our interventions in the Equality Court. We use the Equality Court more than anyone. And that has really enriched the jurisprudence of the court and the standing of the Equality Court.
I want to ask you one last question, Professor Tsepo Madlingozi. Are you confident about the future of human rights in South Africa?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I can give you just one example. If you look at the statement of intent for, the creation of the government of national unity, they were very clear. Human rights should be respected. The rule of law must be respected. The constitution must be upheld. That's very, very big. That as politicians with their own selfish interests, but they know that the constitution should be number one. I don't think we should underestimate that. So I'm just giving you a current example of how human rights culture is so embedded even in our politics, our fabric of, politics. The youth, especially so-called AMA 2000, on social media, on TikTok, they use the language of human rights. They know their rights. They know you can't do this to them, you can do that to them. That gives me hope about the future.
And I think that's a good place to end this conversation. Respect to you and your organization.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.